Picture this. You're sitting across from your opponent at a massive chess tournament. The tension in the room is just palpable. The clock is ticking down. Suddenly, you look at the board and realize your opponent has just intentionally given up their queen, the absolute most powerful piece in the entire game. I mean, would you do it? Would you sacrifice your absolute best asset just to completely scramble the mind of the person sitting across from you? Well, in 1953, against a player named Isaac Bierbrugger, a young chess prodigy did exactly that. He gave up his queen for just a knight. And not because he had some guaranteed checkmate lined up, but simply to embrace total, absolute chaos on the board. His opponent, despite having this massive material advantage, completely cracked under the sheer psychological pressure and blundered right into a losing endgame. And this wasn't just some wild one-off game, you know? This was a warning shot to the entire chess world.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the life, the mind, and the absolute brilliance of that audacious young prodigy, Mikhail Tal. Often known as the magician from Riga, Tal was this true, undisputed creative genius of the chessboard. While other top players relied on calculated math and really strict positional safety, Tal played in this daring, highly aggressive, and deeply combinatorial style. His absolute unpredictability made him one of the most feared and, paradoxically, beloved players in chess history. We're going to break down exactly how his brilliant, chaotic mind worked and how it propelled him to the absolute pinnacle of the sport.
Section 1. The Magician's Daring Sacrifice.
Okay, so to really understand Mikhail Tal, the absolutely crucial point is grasping this concept called the initiative. In chess, having the initiative basically means you are the one making the threats. You're dictating the pace of the game, and your opponent is constantly forced onto their back foot just trying to respond to you. Now, Tal rarely sacrificed pieces because he had calculated some perfect mathematical advantage 50 moves deep. No way. Instead, he sacrificed material specifically to seize this initiative. He wanted to create problems that were just simply too complex and terrifying for his opponents to solve under the ticking clock. Because remember, the clock is a weapon in chess, and Tal used it brilliantly. By sacrificing, he dragged his opponents into this dark, tangled forest, where 2 plus 2 suddenly equaled 5, and where he alone knew the way out.
And what's truly fascinating here is that Tal himself knew exactly how crazy some of these early risks were. Looking back at that incredible 1953 game against Bierbrugger, where he sacrificed his queen, Tal later reflected, "My more mature self might have rejected the sacrifice." But you see, that youthful audacity was exactly his weapon. He knew that sure, if a modern computer today, like Stockfish, looked at the board, it might say his sacrifice was technically flawed. But his human opponents were not computers. They were flesh and blood. And under the crushing psychological weight of Tal's attacking pieces, they almost always folded.
Moving on to Section 2, the youngest world champion. Let's dive right into this, because Tal's sprint to the top of the chess world is literally unbelievable. It completely defies the normal progression of grandmasters. Starting at the Riga Palace of Young Pioneers, he burst onto the scene in 1949, when, at just 13 years old, he used this highly imaginative combination to defeat an established chess master in a simultaneous exhibition. Flash forward to 1957, at the incredibly young age of 20, he becomes the youngest player to ever win the insanely competitive USSR Chess Championship. And then, the big one. In 1960, at just 23 years old, he reached the absolute summit. He defeated the legendary Mikhail Botvinnik to become the youngest world champion in history. That's a record so staggering, he actually held onto it until a guy named Garry Kasparov came along decades later.
That 1960 World Championship is just a brilliant illustration of a clash of absolute opposites. Seriously, look at this contrast. You have Mikhail Tal on one side, chaotic, heavily tactical, wildly aggressive, relying entirely on improvisation and this deep, intuitive feel for the board. And on the other side, you have the defending champion, Mikhail Botvinnik, highly strategic, incredibly technical, a true master of slow, squeezing maneuvers. Botvinnik was basically the grand patriarch of the scientific Soviet chess school. Tal was the rebel artist just throwing paint at the canvas. And in 1960, the artist's chaos completely overwhelmed the scientist's cold logic.
Section 3. A Reign Cut Short.
But, behind his brilliant, dominating mind, Mikhail Tal faced a really grim reality. He struggled with severe, compounding physical frailties throughout his entire life. He was born with a congenital deformity called ectrodactyly, meaning he was missing fingers on his right hand, though, amazingly, he didn't let this stop him from becoming a very skilled piano player.
But much worse, however, were his chronic, agonizing kidney problems. The pain was just unrelenting, eventually leading to one of his kidneys being removed in 1969. And because of this intense pain, he actually briefly suffered from a morphine addiction. When you combine this immense physical toll with his habits of heavy drinking and nonstop chain smoking, well, Tal spent a tremendous amount of his prime years in and out of hospitals, literally playing through agony.
Now Botvinnik, ever the calculating scientist, used Tal's physical fragility and his stylistic preferences completely against him. When they played a rematch for the World Championship in 1961, Botvinnik didn't just show up to play. He arrived with a ruthless, laboratory-tested strategy. Step 1. He rigorously and systematically analyzed Tal's style to find the cracks. Step 2. He completely refused to engage in the complex tactical melees where Tal thrived. He just wouldn't take the bait. Step 3. He forced slow, grinding wars of maneuver and deep endgames. Now, Tal's doctors actually advised him not to play the match at all due to his failing kidneys, but Tal stubbornly refused to back down. So ailing, exhausted, and completely outmaneuvered stylistically, Tal ultimately lost the title.
But hey, even when things were incredibly tough for him physically, Tal never ever lost his brilliant sense of humor or his psychological edge. Check out this amazing anecdote from the 1959 Candidates Tournament. So, Tal was famous for having this intense, piercing stare that seriously intimidated his opponents. To block this out, a grandmaster named Pal Benko actually showed up to their match wearing dark sunglasses. No joke. So how did Tal respond? As a complete joke, he borrowed a pair of giant, goofy beach sunglasses from a member of the crowd and put them on right at the board. It completely diffused the tension, mercilessly mocked Benko's strategy, and just showcased Tal's playful, utter dominance over the psychological space of the game.
Section 4. The unbeatable streaks.
95. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how staggering this is. In a game as complex and punishing as competitive chess, where one tiny slip-up, literally one miscalculated pawn push, means a total loss, this number is almost unfathomable. Between October 1973 and October 1974, Mikhail Tal played 95 consecutive competitive games without losing a single one. This breakdown is just stunning. 49 draws, 46 wins, and absolutely 0 losses. He actually held the record for the 2 longest unbeaten streaks in chess history for over 4 decades. So, how did he pull this off after losing the title? Well, in the 1970s, his game really matured. He managed to integrate classical, solid positional chess with that wild, untamed imagination of his youth. Even while battling chronic, severe illness and being far removed from his world championship reign, he remained a virtually unbeatable titan of the game.
And finally, Section 5. Legacy of the Magician.
Tal's lifelong, just burning devotion to the game is beautifully captured in a story from May 28, 1992. Tal was in a Moscow hospital, effectively dying as his internal organs were failing. But there was a blitz chess tournament happening in the city. So what did the magician do? He essentially snuck out of his hospital bed, went to the tournament, and, remarkably, managed to defeat the reigning world champion, the legendary Garry Kasparov. It was a final, stunning flash of absolute brilliance. Tal passed away exactly 1 month later, at the age of 55.
This quote from historian Vladislav Zubok perfectly captures why Mikhail Tal remains such an absolute legend today. Every game for him was as inimitable and invaluable as a poem. Tal wasn't just trying to score points on a tournament bracket. He was creating art. He truly believed that chess was a canvas, and his aggressive sacrifices and jaw-dropping combinations were his brushstrokes. He brought immense beauty and thrill to a game that can honestly so easily become bogged down in dry memorization and pure calculation.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to walk away with. Today, chess is heavily dominated by computers calculating millions of moves a second, pushing human players toward incredibly safe, perfectly precise, error-free strategies. But when you look back at the life of Mikhail Tal, you really have to ask, in a world optimized for safety and precision, is there still room for magic? Is there still room to take a massive risk, sacrifice your queen, and create something beautiful just to see what happens? I really hope this explainer sparked your curiosity to go look up some of Tal's famous games and find out for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me on this dive into the mind of the magician from Riga.